Welcome to Girlish Gurus. I'm Joy.
And I'm Susan. And we're here to have discussions about topics on many subjects that we hope are informative, uplifting, and fun.
So, let's get started.
Let's. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Girlish Gurus.
Hello, hello, hello.
Today we have a very, very special guest, our friend Katie Whaite. Joy and I met Katie in our memoir writing class. And since then, we've had the privilege of getting to know her better. And because we spend time together in a small writing group with one of our other writing friends.
Who we'll have to get on here at some point.
Who we will have on here, Ronnie.
She's got a lot going on, but hopefully we'll have her on shortly.
Yes, we'll have her on as well. But Katie was in memoir class because she has a very interesting story to tell, and we thought it would be really great for her to share that with you, our listeners. And so we're going to talk to her a little bit about her background and her history, and then what happened that really threw a wrench in things for her life, but also caused her to realize that she wanted to do certain things, and she is now fulfilling those dreams and living that out. So we're really excited to have her here today.
Yes, welcome, welcome. So
Thank
excited
you.
to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Okay, so Katie.
Yes.
Before we met you, many, many moons ago in a galaxy far, far away, you had a life of creativity. You did creative things. What were you doing back in the day?
Yeah. So, I mean, how far back are we going?
I think it's important to go pretty far back to explain. Part of the reason why this episode is important is because we as women give up our creative endeavors to pursue things that are more practical, and we begin taking care of other people pretty quickly. And so I think it's pretty interesting to me anyway that you had a whole career as a creative individual and then became a mother and etc. So as far back as you want to go, explain kind of what you were doing when you graduated and embarked on your professional career.
Yeah. So I was always drawn to the arts, whether that was drawing, fine arts, music. I started doing music at a very young age. My parents are not musicians at all. So it's interesting that my brother and I were drawn to art and music. I was picking out songs on the piano as far back as probably 7, just by ear. So my mom quickly got me in piano lessons. So yeah, I was playing piano. Started playing the flute, started playing guitar throughout middle school, high school. My brother is a really good guitar player, and so I was like asking him to teach me how to play guitar. But yeah, I was composing pieces on the piano probably around middle school, high school, and it's very sad. I have forgotten most of those things. I didn't write them down, so now I don't know where they are, trapped in my brain somewhere. But yeah, and especially in high school, I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew that I loved art. I was in AP art classes. I was like, I just would love to go to art school or do something with art. But I also was so pulled to music too. But practically speaking, I was not great with the technical side of music. So I got very intimidated about what I could do with music. And that's kind of a shame, because I think back, if I could have pursued music, I think I probably could have and should have maybe, but it's one of those things where I felt like fear kind of held me back, and just, I don't know, the theory, I'm not good at that kind of thing. But anyway.
And your parents probably didn't really know how to guide you in that. That's hard.
And and it's also, you definitely have voices telling you to do something more practical.
Always.
I was kind of between the two things. Neither of them were necessarily practical, but I ended up going with art, going to a liberal arts college in Virginia. And then I was like, well, maybe I should get a degree in teaching so that I have art, like fine arts, but then also, teaching in my back pocket, so I have something practical
and to fall back on, right?
Which I didn't do. You know what? I think I'll just stick with art. that's my major, and I just kind of dropped the educational part. So I did spend my 4 years in college really digging into fine arts and loved it. And I also joined a band, and guitar was kind of on the side, but I was the keyboardist of my band. Started singing in my band. I never ever sung before. It's one of those things where I just had told myself at a young age that I was a terrible singer, but also growing up in the 80s, it was like Whitney Houston and like those were the
Mariah Carey,
Madonna. Yes.
And I was like, I don't sound like them. So I must be a terrible singer. But I started doing harmony in my band, and then that became a really important part of my life. I was writing music with these other musicians and it was kind of a dream.
Yeah.
Doing art as my everyday, my job was as a student was to be an art student and do the best I could, and learning all these different types of art, and then practicing in my band at night. And we did a lot of gigs, and we did conferences, and we would go to churches and do the music there. So yeah, it was a kind of a cool time.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, as I graduated and started doing other things, like I had people in my life saying, you have a nice voice. You could sing. You should sing. It took me a long time. I definitely think there's some confident issues there.
Well, that's true for everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's vulnerable,
Sure. Absolutely.
Singing in front of all these people. So
doing any art and letting anyone see
Yes.
you do art is vulnerability.
Oh, yes. And that's why it's so good for us. But yeah, so I think slowly I started doing some stuff on my own. Again, just a lot of people encouraging me. But I definitely went through that season after graduating from college. Like, what am I going to do now? That was fun. I have a degree in art, and I have a lot of experience with music, but it was definitely a wake-up call. And then you start thinking, everyone was right. You should definitely have a backup plan. After college, I did all kinds of interesting things. I moved around a lot. I joined a missions organization because I want to help people. I looked into the Peace Corps. There's all these things that I wanted to do. I also was trying to just, I think, put off the real world for a while. But I did join a missions organization. That was amazing. It was right after 9/11. And I ended up moving to New York City for a short amount of time just with this organization and kind of helping at Ground Zero and,
Wow.
Supporting the firefighters and the police officers. And we were actually at Ground Zero working at the Salvation Army tent, doing night shifts, trying to help people. That was really intense, but really amazing. I think that's what started my love of New York City, which later in my story, I end up there. During that time, too, I think it was one of those things where I could use my musical experience and background, because we did, again, we're just 22-year-old kids just trying to help and save the world. But within this missions group, there was a lot of us who were musicians and singers. So even our downtime, we were in Central Park or in the subway station trying to sing and perform uplifting music. It was a really interesting time in New York City. Like, people were very open.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very open, very vulnerable to receive that kind of thing. But yeah, looking back, I'm like, wow, that was an interesting time in my life. Didn't know what to do. And okay, I'm just going to sign up with this group and put myself out there. But it was very life-changing. I continued with them for a year, and then from there I moved back to Virginia, and then I moved to Michigan, was there for a while. My brother was living there at the time. He was a pastor of a church for the college-age students, and he's like, why don't you come? And again, I didn't know what to do. So he's like, why don't you come and you can do music with my college kids? And I was like, okay, sure. So I led worship for college students for a while. And that's really when I started seeing that I did have some friends who were musicians that I played with, but I think that I started getting more comfortable with doing my own thing. And I was writing a lot. And I kind of switched to guitar at that point. So doing a lot of acoustic guitar and writing on guitar, writing my own stuff, very indie acoustic kind of stuff, Jewel-like stuff, I guess you could say. And that was kind of my launch pad to moving to New York City, because that was a hard season. I went through a terrible breakup. There's a little bit of strain with my brother, which was hard, but kind of, again, like growing pains. You're going through your 20s and you're trying to figure out your relationships with your family and all that. Nothing too crazy, but just like, I never lived in the same state with them before. And so I was trying to find out who I was.
Right.
And again, I was in my 20s. I wasn't working in any kind of, again, I was an art student in college. I didn't necessarily know what to do. I ended up working at Starbucks when I was like, I think I was probably about 25 at this point, which was a really fun job. So I felt like, but then you're also...
Shout out to Starbucks. Yeah. We need some sponsors.
It was a good job because I could do my music and stuff too on the side. But I definitely went through that whole identity crisis. I was proud to be an artist. I was happy to be working as a musician because I did have some gigs here and there, but it's hard. It doesn't pay the bills, and so you do need to find a job. But I didn't have a practical degree, and so there's a lot of self-doubt, I think, that goes into that. And you see, I grew up in the DC area. A lot of my friends were back in DC. We're like, we're lawyers, government contractors, doing things that were kind of impressive. And I felt like, not shame, but like maybe that I was the one that was not growing up, like not as important as some of my friends who are doing real big girl jobs. So I think it's hard when you're out of college and you have all this experience to not doubt yourself. Maybe it's time to put these things to the side and get a real job.
Well, we've talked a lot about that and measuring ourselves by society standards. So I think that's, again, why this conversation is important.
Right. I agree.
I feel like there is something to be said for people who are willing to put themselves out there and do something creative, because that is impressive to me.
I agree 100%, because that's what I would have liked to have done. And I instead did the practical route and what everyone expected of me, right? That's just...
Yeah, Susan can dance. I cannot dance. But Susan is a dancer. And you sing, too.
Yeah, I sang all through up through college. But yeah, so I wanted to pursue that. But of course...
You got those voices in your ears saying,
yes.
How are you going to pay the bills?
Right.
How are you going to...
You'll never survive doing that. So I have so much admiration and respect for someone who chooses to follow their dreams and that path of creativity, because it isn't something that we as a culture promote for people.
But we celebrate it. We celebrate people who are in bands and making music and making art, who are making movies, and who...
Oh, yeah.
We celebrate it. We really do. But to get there, to get to that point... We're told that is a rarity. That's a unicorn. That's something that's outside of the norm. And I don't necessarily believe that now. So, yeah, an important conversation, especially for women who are in this age of life and who are looking for fulfillment.
Yeah.
It's very important to have this conversation so we can give ourselves permission to look for that.
Right.
And it's never too late.
No,
even if
it isn't.
You didn't have the chance to do that at that age. Yeah, there's always time.
Right.
It's never too late to. And I think that I've kind of moved in and out of different seasons, and now I'm kind of back in a new creative space. But I think it was hard back then because you do need money to live.
Right.
And I did have a lot of office experience. Even every summer, every winter break, coming home from college, I was always working in like temp work. So I moved to Michigan and expected to find like a nice office job, like 9 to 5, and then I could do music at night. It was just a terrible market at the time that I moved. This is 2000, I don't even remember, 2004, I think. And so, yeah, I ended up at Starbucks, which again, actually was probably even a better fit for me because I met a lot of interesting people. But then that was a really hard time living there. As I think a year and a half I was there. really challenging. Oh, it's such a dark, cold place. So that was not
Now,
the
when you
best
say
place to be.
dark, cold place, you mean Michigan, not Starbucks.
Yes, Michigan.
Shout out to Starbucks, I'm saying.
Definitely. I'm speaking of Michigan. I think if you're not from there, you don't have the love of the place. And so if you're just moving in as an outsider, it's very hard to get used to that kind of climate. And it's very dark.
Okay, well, now, let me just say, being from Ohio, so long, damp kind of
I think it's that
winters.
whole area in the Midwest there, because Pittsburgh was kind of the same. Yeah.
So go Buckeyes. We love Ohio and Michigan and Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania.
Right.
But when you're going through like a life,
when you're from the
challenge.
South and you're going through a life challenge,
in the middle of Michigan, winter is not.
Yeah, dreary winter, yes.
But I think that sort of the silver lining in that season of life was that I was like, okay, I'm done. I was so ready to find my own happiness again. I enjoyed my time doing music, and I felt like it really solidified my belief in myself to maybe do this music thing on my own. And I kind of got mad enough to just be like, screw all of you. I'm going to do my own thing. And so I packed up and I moved to New York City. There was a little in between stuff. I had to go home and work and save more money, but for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. But I moved to New York City by myself. Well, just outside. I couldn't afford to be in the city. I lived in Harrison, which is like East Newark. I had a view from my tiny, tiny little attic apartment of Newark, downtown Newark. But yeah, I was there for, I don't know, it was from October to June. And then again, I was working at Starbucks because why do I keep talking about Starbucks? But when you're in that company, you can travel to different cities and just keep your job. So I was in New Jersey and then making my coffee money and then saved up and got a job. I got my big girl job in the city. So again, everything just kind of fell into place. I ended up interviewing at a law firm and got the job working for 2 lawyers. It was the best job ever. They were the nicest people, and was able to move into the city. And so I had my 9-to-5 job, Midtown Manhattan, had a amazing apartment with an amazing roommate that I found on Craigslist.
Wow.
Who's one of my best friends now to this day. Upper East Side. It was a rent controlled 5th floor walk up. So it was like my dream was happening. And that's really when I was definitely very scared to step out on my own as a musician, because I had always had people around me. But that's why I was saying Michigan was probably an important step, because I kind of started paring down the amount of people that I was playing with, from a big band to 1 or 2 people. And now in New York, I didn't know anyone. So I was going to open mics by myself, standing on stages by myself with my guitar and my voice and singing these songs that I had written in the dead of winter in Michigan about how sad I was. To a crowd of people in a Manhattan bar. So
that had to take a lot of courage.
Oh yeah,
it's so funny to
very
me
gutsy. Yep.
that I ended up in that place, because as a kid I was very shy, not even remotely showy. I had the desire. I was like, oh, I wish I could sing. I used to dance a little bit, not probably to the degree that you did, but I would dream about being a ballet dancer. In my head, I wanted to be on the stage, but in reality, I was so shy. And so even to this day, my mom, my aunt were like, I cannot believe that Katie, out of all the kids in the family, that she was the one that moved to New York City and was on stages by herself. It was just such a shock to all of us, including myself.
Well,
so yeah, that was an interesting, it was a great time in my life. I loved being in New York City. I loved it. It was I felt, especially coming from where I was coming from in Michigan, which, I thought was going to be a great time, was New York just was fit like a glove. It's this is my place for now,
And then what happened?
And then
This is the question that a lawyer never wants to ask unless they know the answer to. Yeah. What happened next?
yeah, a lot of things happen. I mean, I guess also to segue a little bit into acting, I always was like, it'd be so fun to act, but again, like never had the experience, was always too shy. And I kind of in a random way ended up in a class. My audition, it's a long story, but there was a competition that would get you money for voice lessons. It was like a scholarship. And I somehow found it on the internet. I don't even know how. And I was like, I definitely could use some money. Maybe I should do this audition. And I ended up auditioning for someone who owned a music studio, did lessons. And I did not win. I didn't win the money. But through that opportunity, I ended up in a musical theater acting class.
Wow.
Because they were handpicking people basically from this competition. She put in this class that will turn into a cast for a original off-Broadway show. So that's kind of confusing, but yeah, I ended up doing that class and then getting cast in an off-Broadway show, which was quite something when you don't have any experience in acting, but this class really helped me with that. So that was my first taste in the theater world and the acting world. And I was like, wow, this is really fun to like be able to sing with all these voices. And of course it's New York City, so everyone is so freaking good. Like the talent is just unbelievable. So yeah, that was my first little taste in acting. So I was okay, now I want to do this too. In the midst of all that, I ended up meeting Dan, my husband, in 2007. And yeah, the years just kind of roll by after, we met in 2007, got engaged in 2008. He moved to Manhattan. He was living in the DC area when we met. We were doing the long distance thing for a long time. He moved to Manhattan 2009, the beginning of 2009, and we got married in the fall of 2009.
So,
but yeah,
okay, you're cruising along. You get married.
Yeah, get married.
You are living life and enjoying yourself, and then you have a baby.
Yep, 2011 we had Miles in New York. Yep.
And you're still pursuing your creative career.
Yeah, I definitely had to take a little bit of a break when I had Miles. That was a really challenging year, his first year of life. But when he turned 1, I had my first post-baby gig like that September when he turned 1. And I was kind of like thinking, okay, I'm ready to get back to myself, to my roots. I was going to take an acting class. I had all these plans. And then
what happened?
And then what?
Yeah, so Miles was 13 months, and out of the blue, very out of the blue, I lost my speech one day. I was taking care of Miles. My husband was at work, out of the apartment. And I went to pick him up and was trying to talk to him, and I could not speak. My words just got all jumbled. And I kept trying, and I was like, wow, I must be really tired right now. And then I realized it was something beyond that. I thought I was having a stroke. I was like freaking out, and I had this baby in my hands, and I was afraid I was gonna drop him. So put him down, went to grab my phone. I was totally aware, conscious. I just couldn't talk. I went to go text Dan, to call him. I was like, wait, I can't tell him what's going on because I can't talk. Went to text him, and I couldn't text either. It's like the wires in my brain crossed. I couldn't make sense of words. I knew what I wanted to write and text out, but I could not make it happen. And so I just stood there paralyzed, completely terrified. And then it passed. It was probably about 3-4 minutes. And then as soon as it passed, I called Dan. He said, you should call 911. I was like, for some reason, felt very scared to call 911. I'm like, well, it's gone now. I knew I had to go to see a doctor or something, but he was like, no, call 911 right now. He's like, get Miles, go downstairs. We had our apartment building had a doorman, there was someone downstairs in the lobby. He's like, go downstairs, be with people, So yeah, I got Miles. Again, I was like, what if I drop him? I was just like very shaken up by this whole experience. Got downstairs, literally just handed my baby to the doorman, who was like, get to know your doorman man pretty well. So I really trusted him. I was like, here, take Miles. I feel sick right now. Couldn't even explain what was happening. And then called 911.
Which started you on a pretty long journey.
Yes, that was one of those life-changing days. It was October 3rd, 2012. It's like one of those days that's like burden your mind forever. So, and it was one of those things when the paramedics showed up, I felt silly. I was like, I'm fine. I don't know what it was. I told them what happened, but you kind of, I just felt silly. I'm like, this is fine. It's too much like attention. Everyone's gathering around. I was like, no, I'm fine. But got to the hospital. Everyone was like, even in the ambulance, they're like, all your vitals are good. You just start thinking like, okay, it was nothing. And then got to the hospital, started doing some tests. Even the doctor was like, I think it was just a migraine. I think you're fine. You're going to be back in my office tomorrow. Just, making it seem like a very light situation. But then I had to have my MRI. They did a scan and got our news that I had a mass in my brain, had a brain tumor,
Right.
which is the last thing I expected. It was like, and I remember thinking like, well, people don't get brain tumors. Like it was like something out of a movie or a TV show. It did not, I couldn't comprehend, especially when you don't have any signs except for the one that like led me to the hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big.
Yeah. And I can't even imagine what that must have felt like to get that news. And I know for you, it probably seems like yesterday still in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you had quite a journey from that point on. Maybe we should, do you want to take a break? Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Okay. I just wanted to make
You
sure.
and I are like, and you're like, no, it's good. Let's keep going. It's fine.
Well, why don't we maybe talk a little bit about then that journey, because this is just the very beginning of a very long road that you were on.
So you find out you have a mass in your brain. You got it? There you go. Okay, so you find out you've got a mass in your brain. And you are now at a point where it needs to be treated. Okay? So from sort of the beginning of that phase of your life, how long were you in active treatment? How long were you... What was sort of the timeline of dealing with managing that situation?
Well,
because I know to a certain extent it's still going on today.
yeah, I have the management of it. Yeah. So with the type of tumor that it ended up being, and, from that point, I had, I was in the hospital for 10 days, maybe 11 days, because I spent the night there and they were putting a surgical team together. So I had emergency brain surgery. I guess it was a day and a half later. And then they did the pathology of the tumor. And it ended up being, so in the brain tumor world, it's not like other types of cancer. There's no stages, it's grades. So grade 1, some people would say benign or the least amount of aggression. 4, of course, it's the most aggression, more dangerous, goes really fast. So I was a 2, so that was actually good news. And I guess for anyone who's listening that knows anything about brain tumors, it was an astrocytoma, which is a low-grade glioma. The glioma family has, varying different types of like aggression. So the glioblastoma is a 4. Those are the more dangerous tumors. But as the doctor told me, which was kind of good news and bad news, that brain tumors, they behave in unexpected ways. So a 4 could end up not doing much at all. A 1 could get more aggressive. Like it really is unpredictable. So, but even from the beginning, I just had this like determination. I was like, okay, it's not going to grow back. I'm going to be fine. So it was just like, it could have been denial. I had a 1-year-old little baby. I was like, this is not happening. This is not, this is not going to shorten my life. That's not an option. So I just felt very like, I just really had like a positive, I guess, viewpoint from the beginning. I mean, of course I had some really dark days. It was just shocking and horrible. And the recovery time was awful. Some people recover very quickly. Some people are out of the hospital in 2 days. That was not the case for me. But I just was like, no, this is not going to seal anything from me. So I was trying very hard to lean into the positive. So even when I found my oncologist, it was like, I wanted him to tell me what I wanted to hear. Like, do you have patients with this diagnosis that live decades? And he was like, yes. I can't guarantee. I'm like, I know you can't guarantee.
No guarantees, right?
But I just need to hear that. So, and the other good thing was I didn't have to go through your standard treatment at that time. So no chemo, no radiation. And that honestly was like such a relief because I was afraid of all that. I was like, I cannot be, I don't know. I was 34 years old. I was like, I cannot be, taking care of my 1-year-old baby and going through chemo. I just, that scared me more than anything. So, just like that picture in your head of what cancer treatment would be like, I was like, I can't. So that was the good news, is that really with my type of tumor and my age, there's all these factors. There's always like a checklist. And so he went through the checklist. Like, I also had this other thing that it was in my favor. It's a genetic mutation. That's a good thing to have. IDH1 mutation, for anyone that knows anything about brain tumors. People know that's a good thing to have. There's a lot of developments, especially now, 10 years later, of treatments that work for that mutation. But all those things meant that I did not need treatment, and that it was just a watch and wait protocol. So I would go get my scans every 2 months, and they would tell me if it was growing or doing nothing at all. And all those visits after my surgery, everything was fine and stable.
And then you moved to Florida.
About a year later.
Okay. And started treatment down there.
Or just my continual
changed physicians and all that kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah, we just felt like it was time to leave New York. As much as I loved New York, it was a difficult place to be when you have a brain injury. And anytime you have brain surgery, your brain has been bothered, touched, and there is an injury there. And it takes a long time for the brain to heal, which people don't realize that. I had one doctor tell me it's a full 7 years. Wow. I don't know if that's like the standard, what most doctors would say, but it did seem about accurate to me. So my brain was very sensitive, and also something to mention, where my tumor was located, it was in the left parietal, which is right in the middle of my speech center, my sensory and motor function. So it was accessible, which was the good news. It was easy to get out. I wouldn't say easy, but it's...
Well, as brain surgery goes.
Yeah. Right. It was a good location to remove, but a very tricky location because of all the function. And I also... I don't know, people probably don't want to hear this, but I was awake for some of the surgery because they have to make sure they're not damaging your speech. Right. Yeah. So you have to wake you up and make sure you can talk as they're removing it. You don't have pain receptors on your brain. So, but also they couldn't remove all of it because of that. So there's little sliver left, which is what they're watching. But all that to say, I was very sensitive to noise, movement, all the things that New York City,
Right.
it's just constant lights.
I couldn't imagine. Yeah.
And noise. I just remember like the doctors are like, you have to be outside every day. We want you walking, sunshine, that's the best way to recover. And I just remember like trying to do my walks around the block and just being in pain, or trying to go. And this is like, a couple months later, trying to go to a restaurant. I love going out to eat, and walking into a restaurant and turning right around and walking out. I'm like, I can't, it's too loud. But also, Miles was about to turn 2. That winter was just, it was so cold. We would play in the hallway and like the lobby. It was too cold to go outside. So there's just a lot of factors that led us to make that decision to move to Florida. And I also was just trying to get into more, like, I definitely turned my life around in terms of like diet and self-care, wellness. I was like, okay, I feel like there are certain things that can contribute to this kind of situation. And I was, even if that wasn't the case, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep my body healthy and strong so that this thing doesn't come back. So on that list was sunshine and less stress. So Dan randomly had a job offer from a friend that was in Orlando. So that was what led us down there. That's a long answer. I'm like going off the rails.
No, that's important information, particularly in a situation where you've just had brain surgery. You've got a lot going on as a young mom. So I'm sure there was a lot of thought that went into it. I have no doubt. And when you got there, how did things progress?
So I established a new doctor in Orlando and loved him. He was a very kind, positive person. Again, one of the criteria for me was to have a doctor who was really uplifting and positive about my case, because I didn't want to be around people who would say things like, when you need treatment, which I ended up having a doctor who stepped in for one of my appointments who said that to me. When you need treatment, this is what we'll do. Radiation, blah, 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 blah. I was like, nope, I don't, like, there's nothing to talk about right now. So why are you assuming? Yes, I know that most people who've gone through this have reoccurrences, but I didn't want to be spoken to like I was one of the normal numbers. I wanted someone who can be as positive as me. And again, it could have been some denial for sure, but I really liked that doctor. And when he left Orlando and went down south, southern Florida, I followed him there and, was living my life. I really got plugged into our community. It was a great place to have a toddler. It was really hot. I didn't necessarily care for the extreme heat, but we didn't live like right where Disney was. We were further north, but like it was really a nice place to have like a little kid. Like we had good friends. I started getting involved in theater, which was really nice to kind of get back to that. I got plugged in with a theater group and did 3 shows. I was getting settled there and felt really happy. And my health was good and stable. And every time I went to this doctor, I had glowing reports. Like, everything looks great. Keep living your life. Like, and I love that. Like, I loved how positive he was. Eventually, this is, fast forward, we're 5 years we were there. We had the opportunity to buy a house up here in North Carolina. So we started talking about possibly moving, because Dan really disliked the extreme heat. We knew that Orlando was probably not like a long-term thing. And, my family actually was like coming to North Carolina. My mom and my stepdad had moved here to the Raleigh area. My cousin and her family had moved here. And the house that we had our eye on was a house that was going to go on the market across the street from my cousin. So on a cul-de-sac, it was like so perfect and dreamy, and the house was awesome. But it was one of those things where like, I was kind of questioning, like, I didn't feel done in Orlando, but I felt like there was a reason. It's just one of those gut things. Like I was like, I think it's time to go. This house is like, this is such a like rare opportunity. I feel like we should jump on it. But I was like, but I'm just like, I don't know why. Like, why now? Like, I finally feel like settled. At the same time, in Orlando, right around the time that we were making this decision, I started having seizures. And again, I'm like, okay, well, all my scans have been clear, according to my doctor. So like, I was like, when I say I started having seizures, it's not uncommon to have seizure activity after you've had a surgery, a brain surgery, because again, they're messing with your brain. Yeah. That was a fun fact that I learned after. No one told me that, but I mean, what was I going to do? Of course, you had to have the surgery anyway. But I got on seizure meds after my first surgery because I was having not like what you think, your typical seizure would be, like a grand mal, but like sensory stuff. Like you just like feel weird all of a sudden, or like have like my arm would go numb, stuff like that. But down in Florida during this time that we're thinking about moving, I started having bigger seizures, and I eventually did have a grand mal when I was out running in the intense heat of, it was actually one of like the scariest moments in my life. Because I never had anything like that happen. I was by myself. I did make it back to my car and turn the air on. But I wasn't driving. I was sitting in the parking lot, and that happened. And so, that was terrifying. So clearly something was going on. But even then, I was like, I just had a good doctor's appointment. I know it's like there's nothing going on with my brain. So I just like my medicine just might not be working anymore. So had to like got on high doses of my seizure meds. This is like, probably about the month before we were closing on this new house in Raleigh. Moved here. My doctor in Florida got me in touch with got me a referral to a doctor at Duke. Thank God. Duke is an amazing place to be if you have a history of brain tumors. And had my first appointment with my doctor here at Duke, like about 3 weeks after we moved here. And basically it was like getting diagnosed all over again. So she's the one that told me that my tumor was completely back. Like,
wow.
Large golf ball size.
Wow.
Yeah. So the entire 6 years that I had been living since the first diagnosis, it had been slowly growing back. And that's what's hard with this type of tumor. It grows so slowly, millimeter by millimeter. That's hard to say. So it's not like, the next scan, it's like, oh, wow, there's a huge change. To this day, I don't know what happened with my doctor in Florida. And a lot of people, for example, some of my family, like my mom, like were so angry. Like, how could he do this to you? Like, and it's almost like this weird mystery. And I'm weirdly glad that I didn't know in Florida that it was growing. I felt like getting to Raleigh, getting to the level of care that I currently have is what I needed. And I don't know what would have happened. Like, I don't know what my life would have looked like all those years in Florida, living my life happily and feeling healthy and strong with positivity. I wasn't, a patient. If I did know all of what was going on, I would have been presented your typical like standard care, which would be chemo, radiation, no trials, nothing new. It would have just been like your typical stuff.
This is the best we can do right now. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it wasn't like, it's just not like the hospitals near me were not, they could have done that, but there's, what I have now is far beyond what the care that I would have been offered. So I also was just happy and I didn't have that thing hanging over me.
Right.
So in a weird way, I am glad it worked out the way it did. I know that's so strange to say, and it was almost like we were all blinded, because I remember looking at scans, and I'm to this day, I would say to Dan, like, how did we not see a big giant tumor? Like, I looked at some scans. I know sometimes when you're looking at scans, it's confusing to like see what you're looking at. And sometimes I just give the benefit of the doubt to the doctor. Like, you know, it was such a slow growing, so tiny changes each time that maybe they weren't going back far enough to compare it to like the earlier scans. And that's what my doctor currently thinks happened. But going back to that moment, sitting in Duke 3 weeks after moving here and hearing that I have a brain tumor again, it was like getting re-diagnosed without any of the warning. And it was just, that was like a punch to the gut.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And you had a second surgery, did you not?
Yes. So I was
Pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, within a few months. Let's see, that would have been August of 2018. So 6 years later, and then I had the surgery in November. It took me a solid month or so to like figure out what I wanted to do, because the other thing that was hard during all this time is that I had turned my life upside down in terms of like nutrition and all the holistic things that I delved into in Florida. I did everything from, you know, nutrition, acupuncture, supplement, nutritionist who specializes in brain tumors and cancer. I did all the things. If there is something that is shown to help, you know, anti-cancer or to help with managing brain tumors, I would do it. And you know, I remember talking to my doctor and just being in tears. Like, I did so much, and I thought it was keeping everything under control, and it wasn't working at all. And she said something pretty profound that also my dad ended up saying too, like, yes, but we don't know how much that was helping all this time, because when they did remove the tumor, the pathology was still a grade 2, which is really, really good news.
Best case scenario in that situation.
Yeah, because a lot of times people who have a brain tumor, it could advance to a different grade. It's not uncommon to have that happen. So who knows, like, that could have been helping all along. So, but it was, of course, like and I had like a little bit of a following. I had a blog, and I had like a Facebook page, like trying to like share my information with people. Like, people who were diagnosed with cancer would come to me like, what did you do? What have you been doing to keep everything under control? So when all this happened, I also felt like, not a fraud, that's probably a harsh word, but like, I'm this wellness person that's been giving all this advice, and it wasn't even working. So it was definitely like, kind of rocked my world in that sense too. But again, like, we don't know how it maybe was really helping, you know.
Right. It could have been worse. Yeah.
Right. So, but it took me a while to accept the news. Dan and I were very shaken and confused. We're like, well, this doctor is saying everything's great. This doctor is telling me I have a giant ball in my head. Like, who's right? Even though I knew who was right, because I could see it on the scan. But we ended up flying back to New York City to my original doctor, and we sat down with him, and we also like took all the information that I was given at Duke, which they had all kinds of like options. There was clinical trials, like not just one, but like several that would apply to me in this mutation, this gene mutation that I have. So we took everything to him, and we're like, we're confused. This is what's happened since the last time we saw you. Here are the options. And like, it was actually a really great meeting, because he kind of told us his opinion, but he also said, even if you knew all wrong in Florida, you wouldn't have done it. You wouldn't do anything until it starts causing problems. And like, it's causing problems right now. Like, he's like, correct. You haven't had any issues until this year when you started having seizures. And I was like, yes, that's true. It's like, so it's kind of good you didn't know. because like it was nice. You could just like live your life. So, and then he gave us some opinion of what he would choose. So I ended up, when we came back, I ended up saying, okay, I think that I'm feeling led to do this clinical trial. And I actually got the second to last spot.
Wow.
For this particular trial at Duke. And again, that's why I was saying, like, in Florida, none of that existed. A lot of the treatments are just advancing so quickly that didn't even exist in Florida. And also, I mean, it didn't exist. Like, it was, I think, 2016 or 17 is when they started this trial. So yeah, if I'd known this stuff, what could I have done?
Right.
So this trial, it was a vaccine trial, it was immunotherapy, and I had to have surgery, obviously, to have the tumor removed because it was large. So you can't even there's nothing I could do to target it. It was too big. So I had to get it out there first, but then had to go through a year of vaccines.
Vaccines, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a immunotherapy. It's kind of teaching your immune system to go after these
I guess that makes
bad
sense.
guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also a low dose of chemo to kind of help keep things from growing. At the same time, it kind of works together. But that particular surgery, I was very scared. The first time I did not know what I was getting into. So I didn't know what I was also in a state of shock the first time. And so I just kind of rolled into it, and the recovery was not great, but I didn't have major issues. This particular surgery I was terrified. The actual surgery was terrifying. I was also awake for this one too. And I was having definitely more panic for this surgery. I remember you're kind of sedated, but I was feeling panicky even through that sedation. The surgery went great. I have to give my shout out to my doctor, Dr. Friedman, who's one of the best neurosurgeons in the world. Cannot even believe that I ended up with him because it's not like I sought him out. Again, just being at Duke, it was just such a God thing. He was incredible. He got as much as he could. The recovery though was awful it wasn't anything from that. It was just my body. I'm just very sensitive, and some people again are out of the hospital within 2 days, and they had told me that if everything goes well, you'll be home in 2 days. And for me, it was 10 days. I had all kinds of issues. It feels like everything under the sun happened to me, a blood clot. I had blood or low blood pressure issues, where my blood pressure was dropping so dangerously low that, finding out later, I'm glad I didn't know all this at that moment. I could have had a stroke. So they could not get my blood pressure up high enough for me to safely leave the hospital. So I had to have meds through an IV. So I had to be in the ICU for 10 years. 10 years. It felt like 10 years. 10 days. I also couldn't talk. When I woke up from the surgery, I lost my speech. I had all kinds of speech issues that still linger today. But, and they said, your brain is swollen right now. So when the swelling goes down, you'll get your speech back. But it was not necessarily that easy. I had to go to speech therapy. I had lost all the feeling in my right side, my hand, my arm. I couldn't pick up a fork. I had to learn to write again. And again, anything they could do to get as much tumor out, yes, that's what I wanted. And of course they couldn't remove it all because they have to stop at some point in that location of the brain. So that otherwise you would be damaged, I would not be able to talk at all, even right now. So I remember Dr. Friedman telling Dan and I the spot of my tumor, it was like operating in Manhattan. Like, it's just like getting through all these little streets. Like, it's so crowded. There's so much like important stuff. And so you have to be, it's like,
Wow.
yeah, it was a difficult surgery. And I did not realize that waking up, that I would have all these issues. And it took months and months to recover my speech and I still to this day don't have my feeling back in my hand. So I have partial sensory, but I don't have full sensory.
Wow.
So, yeah. So going through sort of the emotional trauma, physical trauma of the recovery and the vaccine trial with the chemo, which kind of makes you feel icky. Not like your typical, like my hair didn't fall out. I wasn't nauseous and sick all day. It was just this low grade fatigue and just not feeling great for a year. And so that wrapped up in December of 2019.
Which brings us back to the point where we all met.
Yeah, right around there. So
January of 2020.
January
Exactly.
2020.
Oh, it was right after that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're not done talking, first of all.
Right.
We have more to talk about.
Well, of course.
So I think we're going to turn this into a 2-part interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to encourage everybody to have a listen because I want to hear how you have progressed in your creative journey since the end of your second recovery period. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be the next thing that we talk about.
Yeah. Lots more to discuss, and we'll probably have Katie back for other episodes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yay.
Yes.
I would love that.
Yeah. So,
All right. So thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much. And Katie, thank you so
Yes.
much, honey. We love you.
Yeah.
We
Love
do.
you
Thank you for
too.
being here.
Thanks.
Your story is just so
Amazing.
amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Since we recorded this episode with Katie, she has been gracious enough to give us access to some of her artistic materials, and she is just amazing.
She really is. And we're trying to convince her to put together a Patreon page. And so we're hoping that will be done between the first and second episodes. But in the meantime, we want to direct you towards her album, which can be found on Apple Music. And also, she has a YouTube channel where you can listen to her music as well.
We'll put links to both of those resources in the description of this episode. Please go check it out. Please give her a like and a subscribe and just support her as much as you can.
Yeah, she's a very talented woman. And in addition to that, we're going to put her IMDb profile, which is for her acting. And there's a couple little clips on there of some of the pieces that she's been in. And she also has an Etsy store. It isn't up and active right now, but we're trying to convince her to reopen that for you.
Yeah, we're trying to crack the whip and get her creating, get her moving.
Yeah, but we just want you all to see what a talented person she is, and just
go out and check out her stuff because she's
Yeah.
amazing. She's great.
she really is. So please, again, look her up on Apple Music and on YouTube for now, and we'll provide more information on other places to find her as soon as it's available.
And we can update the description of this podcast episode over time. So
Yes.
you might want to come back and check it out. You can also listen to it again if you want.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And part 2 will be coming. So make sure you listen to that.
Yep. All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Girlish Gurus. We hope you'll join us next time for another fun and interesting topic. And please be sure to check the notes for information and links that were included in this discussion today.
Also, don't forget you can find us on our social media platforms, starting with Instagram, Facebook, and now, including YouTube. You can find us by searching Girlish Gurus. And please remember to give this episode a good review and share it with your girlfriends, because the more interaction we get with our podcast episodes, the more episodes we can post. Finally, you can find us on our website, girlishgurus.com.
Thanks again.
See you next time.
Bye.